Ladies and gentlemen, Greg Abingdon, the creator, writer, director, animator for Peach Creek. Sir, how are you?
I'm very good. I'm very good. I'm so sorry. It's George, not Greg.
Ah, fucking A, man. I knew I was gonna fuck it up. I knew I was
Yeah, at
gonna
least we
fuck
got
it up.
it out the way at the beginning, right?
Actually, actually, I'm not gonna be able to fix this in post. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stop recording and I'm gonna start recording this fucker all over because I told you I wasn't gonna fuck up your last name, and I can't. I'm sitting here squinting and shit. I just woke up from a nap not too long ago. My eyes aren't
Yeah.
ready. We're gonna redo this shit all over again. I
You're
apologize.
so
So,
focused on the last name that with the
yeah,
first name, you're like,
it's
I'll
like
get that right.
it's
And
like don't fuck up, don't fuck up, don't fuck up. Actually, you know what? I'm just gonna keep it rolling from here because fuck it, man. This isn't perfect. George, I apologize. It's not Greg. Maybe we can call you Greg by the end of this though. So we're just gonna keep this shit in there. This is the first time I've ever fucked up an easy name. But George, not Greg, man. Where are you watching from? Or where are you?
well, yeah, I'm living in Sydney now. I used to be, if my accent's not a giveaway, I used to be from the UK. I grew up in a small town there called Cirencester, um, which, if anyone's ever seen the film Hot Fuzz, I don't know if you have,
Yeah,
Julian, but it's
yeah.
basically that. Like they filmed it like 10 minutes away from where I lived. And yeah, I moved to Sydney 3 years ago and been here ever since.
One of my favorite scenes, and I use it as a GIF all the time in any kind of correspondence or any kind of chatting with my friends, is I can't remember his name, and I'm pretty sure it's not Greg or George, but he's sitting in there, he's got his little hat on, and then he's just pumping shells into a shotgun, and he's clacking and racking. He's like, shame, right? It's Simon Pegg's buddy.
Yes.
So anytime somebody fucks up like I butchered your first name, of all names I could butcher, George, I fucked up the easiest one I'll have today. But that's neither here nor there. We're gonna leave it in and just keep it rolling because, like I said,
Why not, right?
yeah, I mean, somebody's gonna get a kick out of it. But
Exactly.
nonetheless, man, when I started doing this podcast, my focus was mainly, if you couldn't tell, Ninja Turtles. Right, that's a huge Ninja Turtle fan. But when it comes to cartoons, there wasn't anything bigger on Cartoon Network for me than the Ed Boys, Ed, Ed, and Eddy, right? And how I found you guys' channel or what you were doing, my buddy, my tech guy, Larry, he sent me just a random trailer for Peach Creek, right? And I sit here, I'm like, holy shit, is Adult Swim taking a serious approach to the Ed Boys? And then I started looking, and we hooked up on Facebook, and we were talking back and forth. And then I was like, man, this dude is doing the Lord's work. He's bringing the Ed Boys, and I've always wanted to know what happens after, right? What happens after? We didn't get that story, but you have taken it upon yourself to give us a story about the Ed Boys. Before we get into Peach Creek, man, I want to know how you saw the Ed Boys for the first time, because this was a Canadian-based program that
Yeah.
many Canadians, when you talk to people like Mike Kubat, which is one of the main writers, and John O'Howard, two of the long-stayed writers for this show, they didn't even have presence in Canada, and they're a Canadian-based production company. And you somehow, living in UK and Australia, got more insight to the Ed Boys than the Canadians did that were putting this shit on, man. So how did you come about seeing Ed, Ed, and Eddy?
Yeah, it's crazy like how that happened. Like they're based in AKA cartoon, they're based in Vancouver,
Mhm.
right? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. But for me, like I was quite lucky in that I had the UK equivalent of cable, which at the time was Sky, which I think there's now like 4 or 5 different equivalents and versions. But yeah, on there we had Cartoon Network, Boomerang, Nickelodeon, all those channels. And as a kid, like I didn't play that many video games growing up. Up until I was about 13, like my parents didn't really want to give me a console or anything like that. Like my mum had an old Sega Mega Drive, but or Sega Genesis in the US, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so most of the time, my Saturday mornings, Sunday mornings were spent watching cartoons, and I would watch Recess on the Disney Channel. I'd watch a bit of SpongeBob on Nickelodeon, but Cartoon Network was like the OG. It was like the based god of all of them.
Yeah.
Like it had obviously Ed, Ed and Eddy, but it had Codename Kids Next Door, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, and a whole host of other cartoons, and Boomerang then had like all the old school Hanna-Barbera stuff like Scooby-Doo and all that. So yeah, growing up, I was mainly watching Cartoon Network and Boomerang. And yeah, for me, what was interesting about Ed, Edd and Eddy, contrast to all the other cartoons, like they all were a bit, like all the cartoons were a bit, wacky and zany, but Ed, Edd and Eddy was like the only one which kind of had a basis in reality, save for that episode where they broke reality. But uh, that famous one, yeah. Like Kids Next Door had like evil adults and teenagers, and the kids like in a massive treehouse like fighting against them. Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends is fairly self-explanatory, but Ed, Edd and Eddy was just a group of kids living in a cul-de-sac, just having fun in like an endless summer, and then later on at school. Like it was something which I think anyone across the globe, certainly in the Western world, could relate to. Like me growing up, I grew up in like a small housing estate, so I kind of related to that. Like I used to have, me and my neighbors used to make films and video us like doing bike races and things like that. And yeah, so that was, it was just a show which was instantly relatable and like easy to watch. And I don't know, there was just something like a bit of me in like every single character. And what's interesting is when I was growing up, I related most to Double D, but now as an adult, I kind of relate most to Eddy and Ed.
Yeah.
Just because, Ed being a bit spaced out sometimes, and Eddy like just chasing that hustle. So yeah, like it just was a show that stuck with me for a long, long time. And plus, it was fucking hilarious too.
Oh man, it was one. I think if Nickelodeon, because we were talking about pedestals and where we were ranking the different channels. I grew up very similar, just in the States, right? So I grew up watching those Hanna-Barbera classic cartoons, anywhere from the original Scooby-Doo and Flintstones to a pup named Scooby-Doo, and that kind of switched into Fantastic Max and Wacky Races. And then it led to the explosion. Boys and girls, if you're not as old as I am, George, before I get started, how old are you, George?
I'm 23.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
So
man.
I'm quite young, yeah.
Yeah, you're really young. Like when you started naming off some of these cartoons, because I'm 31. I'm not too much older than you. But that's a big age difference, especially when you talk about the cartoons you're talking about, because that explosion from what a cartoon from, was it like 97 or 8 all the way up to 2002 is when they started rolling out. I think when I talked to Fred Seibert, which was the last president at Hanna-Barbera, and he kind of ushered in this just murderer's row of creators, from Johnny Bravo, Dexter's Lab, to Ed, Edd and Eddy, to insert any cartoon here. They had just a lineup of just murderers when it was coming to animators, voice actors, writing scripts, all this stuff. And the only thing that I can say that Nickelodeon had, that Cartoon Network did not have, was this show called Hey Arnold. This show, if this would have been on Cartoon Network, they would have destroyed 100%. I love this little football head, right? That show was so fantastic, right? That's the only thing Nickelodeon had that, in my opinion, they could go show for show, and Cartoon Network was winning. But if it was like between Hey Arnold and, Ed, Edd and Eddy, I would want to go hide in the closet, stick my head in the ground, because I don't want to vote on that, because those two shows were so influential in my life. And like you said, small area, right? So I grew up on a cul-de-sac when this thing was really popping, and you could kind of pick out every character in this show, and you could associate them with one of your friends or somebody in the cul-de-sac. And for me, that's what stuck, right? It was a cartoon, but it was fake, but it was real, in a sense that I felt or saw almost everything, from the crazy wackiness of Ed to the scheming hustler, right? That con man and Eddy, and that complete just germaphobe Double D.
Yeah.
It was just a fascinating cartoon. And to hear that you're fucking only 23, right? And you're animating these yourself, correct?
Yeah, at the moment. Yeah.
When I was younger, I wanted to be an animator. I wanted to do this, right? And I could always see something and draw it, no problem. but it was kind of creating was the biggest issue. And then when I saw them rolling out SpongeBob, we went to the Nickelodeon studios, and I saw these huge just drawing boards that they had. The show hadn't rolled out yet, but the artists are down there drawing Squidward and Mr. Krabs and all these crazy characters. And then I see this one guy in the corner, and he's just ripping paper off, balling it up and throwing it behind him. And he's going on, he's like, shit, I don't like the way that one looks. He's just doing this. And this is where I found out that I would never, ever, ever be in this industry, right? I couldn't, I guess I couldn't create, but I could see and replicate. And everything he was throwing away, I figured at a young age, I'm like 6, 7, somewhere around there, maybe 8. I was like, man, my mom would have hung that up on the refrigerator because she thought I did a really good job. And this dude's just tearing all of his artwork down. I was like, I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
What was it that what experience or what happened and you thought the light bulb goes off in your head, I want to be an animator for the rest of my life, or I want to do this? What was that moment that snapped like, shit, I'm doing this right now?
That's a really good question. I don't know if it was a moment as such, like I mentioned earlier, like me and my neighbors, when I was like 10, 11 years old, we used to have like this really shitty camcorder, and we'd like film ourselves racing our bikes like around the neighborhood and around the block and everything. And then at one point, one of us, and to this day I still don't know who, was like, hey, why don't we add a story to this?
Yeah.
So that's where the kind of passion behind story making, filmmaking sort of happened. So like we did the little filming all together, and then I was kind of just responsible for editing the whole thing. So getting all the video files and putting them together into something cohesive for an 11-year-old using iMovie.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, it kind of just escalated from there. So like we eventually made like a Harry Potter parody, which looking back on it was shit, but like for 12-year-olds, it was like the best thing ever.
Please tell me you still have these files. I gotta say, man, I would love, and I'm pretty sure fans would love to see them too. But when was the last time you seen it? Do you still have this file of a lot of the older first things you were doing?
Oh man, I really hope I do. Last time I saw it was probably 6 or 7 years ago. It was on some old iMac, which had like 2 gigs of RAM and was really, really slow. Like it was impossible to do any kind of video editing on it, but like it was all I had. So I was like, I'm just gonna do it. So I think it's probably still knocking about somewhere, or maybe my mum was like, for posterity, put it on a hard drive and archived it. I'm hoping it's still around, because like, yeah, it's not funny in the slightest, but it's kind of like, I remember watching it like 6 or 7 years ago or whatever and being like, it's kind of charming. It's got something
heart, right?
to it, you know? Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, from there, like I studied creative media in high school, and it then kind of took a bit of a back seat. I kind of tried to keep up like a YouTube scene, but then that kind of fizzled out. And it was only recently where the spark kind of came back. So who I really, really have to give credit to is an artist by the name of Naja Porter, who now works on Craig of the Creek. She did a whole bunch of like fan art and pictures of the Eds and Kanker sisters and all of that. And they had like this really kind of unique art style to them, like this, not gritty, like I hate to grungy, use that word, right? But a little bit more grungy. And a lot of people make this comparison to Gorillaz, and I've seen some comments on the trailer and some of the artwork, you know, like which I've posted, being like, they're getting a Gorillaz vibe from it. And I guess like that was an influence on Naja Porter too. And yeah, like I saw one of her artworks on, I think, DeviantArt or whatever, and a comment underneath it just said something like, I would love to see a full series of this in this kind of art style. And I didn't want to do Naja's art style because that would just be flat out plagiarism.
Yeah.
So what I did was kind of just go back to, you know, the original art style of the show, and then I just kind of played around and went, okay, what do I like from here, and then what do modern cartoons do, and what can I do with my own twist on it, my own kind of creative flair. And yeah, it took about maybe 8 or 9 months of just continuous drawing and redrawing and changing and all of that until I found an art style I was kind of happy with, which kind of had this bold-ish outline, which was kind of textured and these quite big eyes. Like there's a bit of a gorillas and anime influence going on there.
Yeah.
And yeah, I then just kind of like I'd done like some stop motion animation before, but never 2D animation, never like hand drawn stuff. So I basically just taught myself Toon Boom Harmony, which is the standard animation software, in however many months. And yeah, I'm still learning it. Like, you know, looking at the trailer and then looking at the first minisode, like just I really hate the walk cycles that I've got of the Eds in the trailer where they're walking away from the camera. I hate them with a passion, but they're there now and they're out there for the whole world to see.
But
and yeah,
that's what's so great, man, because like I fucked up your name. I literally have the name sitting right here in front of me. I shouldn't have fucked it up. So I don't know where Greg, I was looking at my phone before, so something might have popped up and it was just like, oh man, something like that. But it's going to be great because I'll release this one and then I'll listen to it again. Like whenever I finish an episode, I always go back, and I don't know how you work, but like whenever I do something, I go and I rewatch, I re-listen to it, see where I could have shut the fuck up more. Where I could have, you know, let the people talk more or ask better questions. It's an ever evolving process, right? And what I love most is when you put it out there, right? You get to see, and I'm a proponent of not reading the comments because people can just be mean as shit. But luckily for me, you know, I'm such a smaller scale right now that everybody's been pretty, you know, encouraging and nice and, you know, offered, you know, nice words and shit like that. But I get to see where I messed up, where I could have did better. And when I do it again, the next time we talk, I'm going to crush George right out of the fucking gate. I'm not going to mention Greg. Greg is dead after this, right? So you're no longer Greg. You are George, right? But, you know, I like seeing, you know, where I come from. I work in the restaurant industry, and, you know, this whole Corona shit has been crazy. I'm pretty sure you guys understand, right?
Yeah.
So it's crazy, right? So what's great about social media is you post a picture, and then right when you're feeling at your shittiest time, Facebook's like, oh, hey, remember this picture of this food that you cooked and you did and you thought it was so great? And I look at it and I'm like, Jesus Christ, that looks like shit. And I could instantly transport it back to that time. And then I go back and look, I'm like, yeah, but that might have been, you know, not my finest moment at that time, or it might have not been that great at that time. However, 2-3 years down the road, when I'm actually doing this dish on a consistent basis, that dish that I'm doing now started because I did not like the way it looked. I did not like the way it tasted. I did not like anything, or I liked very small amounts about that dish. And you finding not an insecurity, excuse me, that's the wrong word, but you finding something you just do not like about something you created, I guarantee the next time you see it, the next time you do it, you're going to crush that fucking walk scene. And me looking at it, dude, I like I said, I love everything about this, from the art style. I just watched the minisode you guys posted with the Kanker sisters a couple days ago, I think it was. But I just rewatched it again. It is so I love. You said gritty's not the right word, grimy, but grungy. It's so like 90s Seattle grunge scene, like, right? So it's fantastic, man. What I like hearing is, what else didn't you like about when you put it out there? You know, you said the walk scenes. Was there anything else you picked on that you really wanted to change, or you really want to make sure you crushed it right out of the gate the next time?
Oh God.
I promise
really
we'll get better with it. We'll ask you what you liked about it soon, but I always like how you guys' brains work. And
no, I'm enjoying these kind of challenging questions. I like it. I think, oh, actually, now that you mention it, it's basically every bit which I fucking animated. I love all the backgrounds I drew. I'm still happy with those. But the scene of the three of them in the van when it starts up, like, I'm happy with the smoke coming out of the exhaust and whatever, and I'm happy with the van like vibrating when the engine starts and whatever. But I think it's one when Double D turns his head to look at Eddie. Like, I knew for when you animate it, you kind of have to exaggerate a little bit. So, you know, not sometimes when people turn their head, they'll just do that. But when you animate it, you kind of dip the head down as you look up. So remember to do that. Yeah. But all I did was trace off of the model sheet when I actually did the animation of Double D turning his head. So I had a drawing of Double D front, 3/4 and profile. and I just did those drawings, just traced off of the model sheet I created, and then just tilted one of them down. So then it just kind of did the head motion.
That's awesome.
And it's a really cheap way to do it. And now I'm looking back on it, I'm like, why the fuck did you do that, George? Like, it takes an extra 30 minutes to just draw it like a normal human being would, like a normal animator. But hey, whatever.
Are you a
Yeah.
paper or a digital guy when you draw?
I really wish it was paper.
Yeah.
Because Danny, the creator of the original show, is a huge proponent for traditional mediums and doing paper animation and doing it the old school way. I just don't have the facilities or the space to do that. I live in a really small townhouse, and yeah, there just isn't enough space to have a full animator's desk and hundreds of thousands of sheets of paper and animation cells, and then the actual camera equipment to record each thing. I would really love to do that. And if I was to ever, in a fucking dream world, if I was to ever work on in a show for Adult Swim or even Cartoon Network or Nickelodeon or whatever, I would love to go back to that old school method, because this art style, aside from maybe the backgrounds, it does translate quite well onto traditional mediums. So like I've drawn the characters out on pencil and paper and outlined the marker and whatever, and they still look as they should. But it's just a question of the facilities, the space, and the money, I guess, as well. Like yeah. So unfortunately, yeah, Danny will, if he ever sees the show, like I don't know what he'd think of it, to be honest with you. I don't know whether he'd be flattered that if someone's continuing the story, or upset or whatever. Like, yeah, but I really wanted to do it traditionally, but I just can't.
Yeah, you got to do what you got to do, right, man? You always start small. You don't ever want to sit out here and just fucking go balls to the wall and get everything you need, because there's always these what ifs. After this, after I hit that little end meeting, stay on, and then we'll chat. Or if you have to go, I'll hit you up, and then I'll point you in the direction of some people that I've talked to and some people that I've worked with, like the two writers from Eddy, and then Fred. And then I can't guarantee anything, but at least they might be able to at least point you in the right direction, and they keep up pretty well with Danny. So worst comes to worst, man. Hopefully, if anything,
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Man, it's no problem. You do something, like I said, that I wanted to do so long ago in animation. What were some of since we talked about your least favorite parts, what are some of your favorite parts about animating this right now? Like, what have you just like really fell in love with? You said you loved the scenery and the backgrounds and the smoke, and then the way they had to go and twist and turn. But what are some of the things that really pop off the screen? No pun intended for you when you watch
it. Honestly, I think, I don't know, some characters I really love to draw more than others. Like Marie, for instance, is brilliant to draw, because it's so easy to draw her in comparison to other characters, because she's basically an oval shape with a dip for her chin. And that's it, really. Like Double D, like he kind of has these weird kind of cheekbone effects going on, and if you get them wrong, it looks completely weird. So it's not fun drawing him. But if I draw him any other way, it doesn't look like Double D anymore. It just looks like some random guy wearing a beanie. So yeah, drawing Marie and Eddy as well. Like Eddy, because of the fact of the shape of his head, it's so much fun to just kind of draw him in these really exaggerated poses, like the original show. Like they really contort and distort the shape of their heads and bodies and whatever. And I wanted to try and keep some elements of that in this show, but kind of bring it back a little bit to reality. One, because I'm still learning as I go, and doing these hugely exaggerated poses is something which takes years of experience to get to. Like you compare season 1 Ed and Eddy to season 5, like the way in which it's animated and the art style is almost completely different. So but yeah, going back to what I like, the backgrounds are a lot of fun to do, and the overall compositing of everything so my workflow at the moment is I do all the 2D animation in Toon Boom. All of that is hand drawn and then hand colored and hand shaded and everything. So it's a bitch of a process to do. It takes fucking forever. But when you composite it into After Effects and you layer it all up with the background elements and all of that, it ends up looking, in my view, it looks pretty good. And I'm happy with how that looks now. Like I did a concept art for Lee in the trailer where she sat at the table just with a stack of bills around her. Because in my headcanon, their mom isn't really around anymore.
Please tell me they're $1 bills.
I wish. Oh no, sorry. As in like,
I got
I mean like overdue bills. Yeah.
Yeah, I got you on the bills, but when I started thinking, please make her.
I wish. Maybe that's a career path she's probably considered, but yeah. So yeah, just compositing that image of Lee with the background elements. And then I because I'm a big Thunderbirds fan. I don't know if you've seen that show or whatever, but it was really big in the UK in the 90s and early 2000s. It's like this marionette puppet show, like it was what Team America was based off of. Yeah. So I got like a clip from that, put it on the TV in the background and blurred it. So only like I know that it's a clip from Thunderbirds. To everyone else, it just looks like, oh yeah, they're just watching like Fishbowl 3 or whatever TV show or film the Kanker sisters are watching. But in my head, I'm like, Thunderbirds. Yeah.
I love that. Are you a comic book fan at all?
I wish I was. I didn't really grow up with them that much. I used to read a bit of Spider-Man, but I was so young. And the thing is, I barely remember any of the comics now. Like I used to read some Spider-Man comics, and I don't know what happened to them. So
it just happens.
Sorry, mate.
No, you're perfectly fine. But the only reason I bring that up is because I love looking in the background. There's some books that I've got down here where it forces you to look in the background, because when you look in the background, you're going to laugh or you're going to chuckle, because they're taking, like you, their inspiration or something they really enjoyed, and they want somebody else, even if nobody gets it other than them, and maybe the person that might have done that. It's just a little tip of the cap or a nod to that. I love that type of fan service. You guys take something that you absolutely love and you got to bring it in, like I do with all this shit. I mean, I have nothing to do with any of this stuff other than it makes me feel like a kid again. I have fun. You know, when I come in here, it's like me taking off my adult hat to put on my kid hat, even though I never fucking take this hat off. This is always the hat I have on. I love seeing that, man. And where did you get that mind? And I promise you, we're going to get to Peace Creek, but I love, talking like the inside form of an animation, because I wanted to do it and I never did it. So I like seeing somebody's that's done it and is doing it and is continuing to grow. I love that process. Where did you see that, or why did you want to do it for that show, the Thunderbirds?
As in, like, sorry, just to clarify, so adding in like little background gags and little references, which maybe only I would get, right? Is that?
Yeah, well, not so much that you get, but like, why was it that show that you wanted to put as a nod?
Oh, right. Yeah, okay, I'm with you now. Sorry, I think I just missed half of it. Yeah, it was, again, like similar to Ed, and Eddy. It was just one of those shows which had a huge influence on my childhood. So there was this huge boom of Thunderbirds nostalgia and merchandise and whatever, first in the early 90s, so just before I was born, but then there was another resurgence of it in the early 2000s. So the original Thunderbird show was like from 1965. Like, it's fucking old now. Like, it's like almost 60 years old. And yeah, like the guy who created it, Jerry Anderson, he made a whole bunch of other marionette shows like Stingray, Captain Scarlet, Joe 90, and a few others. He then transitioned to live action and made Space 1999, UFO, and then yeah, he kind of went into retirement. But yeah, there was this massive resurgence of just Thunderbirds fandom in the early 2000s. So almost every single schoolboy in the UK, like if you're like 10 years old or something in like 2004, 2005, everyone wanted to get Thunderbirds toys. So you'd have like these little Thunderbird space rockets and all the craft and machinery they use, and then their home base, which was called Tracy Island, which is like this island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
And you get that as a playset. So it was just a show which I grew up with a lot. And in the concept art that I created, I needed something playing on the TV in the background just to have the just to give a bit of
almost
make the world feel alive.
Yeah.
So I thought it's going to be blurred, and I don't want to go out and record my own thing just for a piece of concept art. So I thought I'll just get a clip from Thunderbirds and put it in there. And I chose one of my favorite episodes of Thunderbirds called Attack of the Alligators, which is where the premise of Thunderbirds firstly is just a group of 5 brothers led by their dad, called International Rescue. They go out and save people in dire need of help. Like if someone is trapped in a submarine at the bottom of the ocean, or an astronaut who's like been disconnected from spacewalk in space. That's the whole point. Yeah, and Attack of the Alligators was where a growth serum ended up going into a swamp and causing alligators to grow to a massive size, and they were attacking a house, and people were trapped in the house. So the Thunderbirds International Rescue came and saved the day. So I just got a clip from that episode and just put it in the background. And yeah, it was just a little nod for me. So if no one else sees that clip, fine. But when I see it, I'm like, I know it. I know it's just for me.
I like I said, I love that, man. When you guys sit here, and like I said, if and when Danny sees this, I really hope he does. I hope that he has that same, mindset that you did. This kid fucking sees something that he loves. He brings it in. It hits him. It strikes a chord so hard. He's like, I'm going to do this for a living. And the first thing I really want to do and get out there, or, just dive headfirst into, is something that Danny created a long, long time ago. Like I said, like, it's crazy how things like touch you. They reach out between movies and music and cartoons and comic books and regular books. It's crazy what you stick to. And I've got to say, out of all of that, I live in Florida and we have nothing but alligators, and they flush meth down they flush meth down the toilets and all that other stuff. So we got all these gators that are just like hyped up on meth, around. And the first thing I think of, I'm like, oh shit, I'm walking to my car and some fucking 40-pound or 40-foot alligator is sitting out here. So that's a terrifying thought. I got to imagine that people out there are a lot like you when they see something they love, or that made them elicit some kind of feeling or emotion at one point in time in their life. And you tipping your cap, or you're nodding to 2 people in that sense, the Thunderbirds and the Ed Boys, right? So you said earlier when you were doing, was it Nija? I just don't want to pronounce her name wrong too. What was the?
Naja. I think it's pronounced Naja. It's how I've pronounced it in my head, and I hope I'm pronouncing it right. I haven't heard it spoken, but yeah, it's Najja. Naja. Porter, who I know works on Craig of the Creek now. I really just have to tip my hat off to her, because just the artwork that she's done is incredible, and there's a very good reason why she got hired to work on Craig of the Creek. Like the poses which she's put them in, and her sense of color is fucking amazing.
Yeah,
like she is incredible at doing color. Like it's a really subtle thing. Like it's one of those things where you don't consciously notice, but you subconsciously notice color in storytelling and film and whatever, and she uses it impeccably. Like she's fucking amazing at what she does. So yeah.
Well, if anything, I hope you pronounced her name incorrectly as well, so that way we can kind of
like poetry, it rhymes.
Yeah, it's bonding if nothing else, right?
Yeah.
So when you got you came up with the idea, I'm assuming, for Peach Creek, right?
Yes.
So what was what was that like, or where were you at? Do you remember like, I'm just sitting here, I'm eating eggs and bangers or fucking bacon and, hash browns? What were you doing? You're like, you know what? Ed and Eddy, 5 years later, that's a story we're going to tell, or I'm a story I'm going to tell. And where was that moment at?
Yeah, definitely. So there is another thing I need to cover about the Ed and Eddy 5 years later. So I'll do that second, but first, in terms of getting the idea, again, it was mainly from that comment on the Naja Porter artwork, and the drawing was of. Did I just turn off my camera?
Quite possibly. I see.
Sorry, I was trying to get a hair off with my keyboard, and I accidentally pressed the space bar. Yeah, so that drawing was of the three Eds in the junkyard just sat on a couch. And yeah, the comment there was like, I would love to see Ed and Eddy, a sequel done in this art style. And I was like, I would love to do that.
Yeah.
Like no one else was doing it at that point, so far as I knew, which is something I'll cover in a second, because someone was working on an Ed and Eddy sequel. And yeah, from there I was like, okay, well, the logical progression of the Eds would be from them to go from junior high to high school. Like, it would seem weird to kind of miss out 5 to 10 years of their life, and now all of a sudden they're all like above the age of 30 and whatever. Like, Eddy's working as a used car salesman, double D's, like, a professor or chemist, but with dreams of being an adventurer, explorer, or whatever. Like, it would still be a great story, yeah, but like, people would just be asking, but wait, what the fuck happened for 15 years? Like, did they graduate? Like, who went to university? Like, what happened?
Yeah.
So from my point of view, the main thing was like, in order to keep all these characters in the same location, like all the same houses that they're living in, it would only make sense for them to stay be in high school, because it'd be highly unlikely for every single character of Ed and Eddy to still be living in the cul-de-sac and the trailer park, Peach Creek as a whole, 15, 20 years later.
Yeah.
Maybe some, but not all. Which then leads me to my next bit, which is someone was working on an Ed and Eddy high school sequel. A girl by the name of, I only know her online name, Vampire Meerkat. And she had been working on an Ed and Eddy high school sequel, but it went quiet. It went dead. Like, she started work on it in like 2009 or something.
Yeah.
Like just after the finale aired, and she released like a couple of kind of meme-ish videos of the Ed Boys, like one where Double D loses his hat and then he kind of does this dance to a music track that she put together, and it was like a remix.
Yeah.
And then one of them doing getting into the van and dancing along to What Is Love. So all three of them just going, what is love? Baby, don't hurt me. All of that. But then the project just went quiet. And I don't know if it was subconsciously in the back of my mind, but I'd forgotten all about it.
Yeah.
Like, we hadn't heard anything from her since like 2014, maybe, where she posted an announcement saying like, it's been 8 years since I've announced it and nothing's happened. And then that was it. It was just radio silence again. I then posted the Peach Creek trailer, like I've been working on the thing for a year, and she had got wind of it and had posted a comment asking, why I'm doing it based, the ads based in high school. And obviously I can understand why she'd be a little bit miffed or peeved over the fact that it seems like it's a similar idea or whatever. And I did my best to try and clarify that the story which I have outlined and the character progression I've got is completely different to what she had written down. Like she had written out an episode list and posted it on like a Wikia page. But again, like the only similarity between what I've done and what she's done is that the Eds fixed up the van in the junkyard,
Yeah.
which to
It's a
me
logical
seems
move.
like a fairly logical thing for them to do anyway. Like they had that van in, a lot of different episodes, and it's quite a big kind of like, it was only in like 4 or 5 episodes, but it's still quite a big icon
Yeah.
of the show. Like, when you think of the Eds in the junkyard, you think of that van.
Yeah, just like Scooby and the gang, you think of the Mystery Machine. You don't
Exactly.
even if they're teenagers. If Scooby and Shaggy is teenagers and they have this,
Yeah.
they're not going to let it go 10, 12, 15 years down the road. They're still going to have this van because it was a huge part of their child, their teenage years and even their adult years. It's something that they will never, ever get rid of. And it's only logical to bring that with them, So I 100% agree with you on that one. I mean, it's logical, right? So
definitely. And yeah, like I said, I think she's quite peeved off over that. There was some minor accusations, not directly from her, of theft, which again, like, is just some of the negative comments on the video, which is totally fine. But yeah, I feel that Peach Creek is going to go its own way, and if she ever is able to finish her idea of the Eds in high school, more power to her. She, it's her, that's her story, that's her head canon, I guess. And I've got mine. Like I've got the story which I want to go down, and she's got her own. And I mean, there's always going to be that kind of thing where people are going to compare the two shows, particularly if she ever does release an episode. But yeah, that's just where things are with that. And the other person who did like some Ed Bannon stuff was a guy who I've been in chats with anyway, called Akeem Lawrenson, who he released like these adult ed boy videos, and of Rolf, of songs which he's created, called one being "Where Did All the Love Go," which has like 2 or 3 million views on YouTube. It's insane. Like it's brilliant as well. I love it.
It'd be fun if everybody could just cohabitate in the Ed boy sandbox.
Exactly.
When I sit here and think about this stuff, I love the idea you were just talking about with the guy that you were in contact with, and they're doing it a little bit further down the road. You said, right? Like a little deeper in age.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's his headcanon, and it's fine. Like, yeah, it's not a biggie.
You two, I mean, it's probably a stupid idea, but it'd be fun to see you two. Did you ever watch the Ninja Turtles, the one they had on Nickelodeon not too long ago? I know you said you weren't too much into comics, but you might have caught this cartoon.
I did watch some Ninja Turtles on Nickelodeon. I can't remember which one it was, though. I know it was a cartoon one, but
it's perfectly fine. But they had an episode where, so in 2012, they relaunched the Turtles when they sold it from when Peter pretty much signed it away. Peter Laird, co-creator, him and Kevin Eastman created the Ninja Turtles. So he had the last of the rights, and he sold them to Viacom, which is a Nickelodeon subsidiary, or vice versa. And then they rebooted the Ninja Turtles, right? So they did this very CGI-based turtle. But what they've done, especially in the last 10 years, really, with the Marvel movies and the DC TV shows and cartoons and all of these crazy things, is they've brought back, like what you did with the Thunderbirds, they brought back an initial, love that they had. So if they had we'll take Flash, right? So the Flash CW series, they brought back John Wesley Shipp, which was the original Flash, and he was Barry Gordon, which is modern day's Flash dad. So it was them tipping the cap or nodding to what came before them, right? And I think it would be a fantastic, or at least fun idea, that if you and this guy, you kind of do one episode, but you got both of them in there, and then you bring the Ed boys back, and it's one of those, remember, they're sitting at a campfire, they're tossing back a couple beers, and they're talking about, you remember that time, and then it flashes back to your Ed boys going through high school, and it kind of mixes and mashes. I don't know. I just think it'd be a fun collaboration.
Definitely. And like I said, I really do want to work with Akeem in some capacity, because like the work he's done is incredible as well. Like the story he's put together for the Ed boys and everyone, like, he's quite mature and adult, and there's some death involved. But like this whole idea of like an Ed's multiverse or whatever, It'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, you just got to get the vampire. I can't remember which vampire, whatever, but it doesn't matter, man. Don't read the comments. Don't read the negativity. Keep doing what you're doing, man. Because like I said, you're on to something here. I think the last video count on the last one was a few 100,000 views already. Correct. So I mean,
yeah.
you're fucking doing something right. You're hitting a chord. You're striking a love string. You're doing something here. And us fans of not only this franchise, but like I said, I found you because my friend sent me a clip that ended up in his playlist. And I had just got done talking to a few people, and he sends me this, and I'm like, is this what they're doing? I legitimately thought Adult Swim had picked this up, because it's something that's got legs, right? And this shit can go. And there's so many stories that somebody on the outside looking in, when it talks about Ed, Edd n Eddy, right? You're on the outside looking in from what Danny created. And then you had a vision, or you had an idea, you had thought about these guys, right? And it would, like I said, it would just be a fun continuation if we just take little segments, right? It doesn't have to be the same. It can all be different. Everybody's got different ideas like you do. What has the response been, at least for you? I mean, like I said, a few 100,000 views on all these videos you're doing. What has been like the most overwhelming response as far as fans coming out and talking to you?
Honestly, yeah, like the big word is definitely overwhelming.
Yeah.
Like when I posted it, the optimist in me was like, I'd love to, maybe break, 10,000 views on the videos. I'd be happy with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it kind of started to reach that point. I was like, oh, cool. And then all of a sudden, like overnight, it just kind of blew up. Like I just woke up and the video had reached like 100,000 views. Firstly the minisode and then the trailer, and it just kept on climbing and climbing and climbing. And I'm like looking at the counters, just like refreshing the page, and they'd be jumping up in the hundreds like every 5 to 10 seconds or whatever. And I'm like, holy fuck, this is crazy. And yeah, it was just absolutely astonishing that had happened. I don't know if like the YouTube algorithm had just gone, yep, you're in luck today, George, and or if it was like a word of mouth thing. Like genuinely have no idea. Like I posted the videos on the Peach Creek Facebook page and on Twitter as well, but aside from that, like I don't have a big following on Twitter, and the page on Facebook only had like at the time like 100 likes or whatever. So yeah, it's just crazy how much it skyrocketed. And like there's been an overwhelming amount of positivity, and people who are so happy, want to see these characters back, but to see them in like something which is completely different to what's been done with them before. Like what I really wanted to try and achieve is to get this kind of sense of refreshing change. Yeah, I guess like you still have the elements of the old art style and the old show, but for this to stand on its own. So I wanted my target, my goal when making it was to have not only fans of the original show be able to watch it, but also new people who've never seen the original show watch it and still enjoy it and still get what's going on. Yeah. Like that's what I really wanted to do. And I tried to, keep thinking about that when I was writing the overall story, writing the screenplays and scripts, and just designing everything. But yeah, like there've been a huge number of positive, supportive comments, and people who are just excited to see more. Yeah. Like even like today, like 2 or 3 weeks after the last video I posted, there's still people commenting, being like, "Can't wait for the next episode, can't wait for the next thing." And I'm like, I'm 100% working on it. Yeah. It obviously just takes a little bit of time, but it's just astonishing how much positivity there is. And yeah, I mean, there've been a couple of negative comments, and there've been ones where it's just people trolling, being like, "Oh, this is shit, you're shit, why are you fucking doing this, you piece of shit," and things like that. I don't get to me, because it's just
you pull that mic down and you tell these motherfuckers to shut the hell up and fuck off. That's what you tell them.
Fuck those. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, for those morons anyway, I don't really give them much care or attention because I know it's just some sad guy who's like, trying to get a rise out of me, and I'm like, I've got too much shit going on in my life to worry about, some idiot on YouTube for me to care about them. And there've been some people who've given like legitimate criticism and critique, and I've responded to those and try to have a good dialogue with them. And most of the time, it's been good, and like we've been able to communicate fine with one another. So yeah, overall, it's always been really, really good. Like, because the people commenting, they're people that
yeah.
I want to make sure that the most of the audience is happy, and this is one of those shows where not everyone is going to be happy with how it goes, and that's totally fine. Like,
man, there's nothing you can do in this world that'll make 100% of people happy. So
exactly,
like I said, keep doing what you're doing, because like I said, a few 100,000, but I was doing the same thing when I was sitting like, oh man, when I had released my first episode, and it's nowhere near the 100,000 mark, it's nowhere near the 1,000 mark. But there was times of jumping up 1, 2, like, oh shit. And then I get my first comment and he's like, oh, they like it. Boom, 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 boom. And then, I posted it on our Facebook page, and then somebody had said something negative about it, right? Had nothing to do with like the episode. He's like, oh, this just sucked. And I was like, okay, let me hit reply real quick. Sucked how, man? And then there's like, it just sucked. All of it sucked. I'm like, you didn't find one thing you liked? And he's like, nah, just overall it sucked. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm not going to get any constructive criticism out of this. I had fun during this interview. I got to talk to a hero. They laughed at some of the stuff I said. So they obviously were having a good time, or if not, they were faking it until they made it. And they made me feel good about faking it if they were, right? So at the end of the day, man, you're doing something that you really love. You're doing something that's fun, right? And you're doing something that a majority of people that watched this show as a kid or an adult or what have you, insert age here, you're striking, like I said, third, fourth fucking time now, you're striking a fucking heartstring with us, right? This has been so fun, right? When you were talking about writing all of this out, the idea you had, how long did it take you to flesh out the entire story of what you wanted to say?
Fuck. So for context, so I started working on this in late August 2019.
Mm-hmm. That is insane.
That is insane. Yeah, I've been working on this for over a year now. Like initially it just kind of started out with, like I saw, like I said, Naja Porter's post on DeviantArt, and I just started out drawing the characters over and over, like figuring out different ways to draw them, whatever. And then little ideas would come into my head of like little snippets of the story, like little elements and chunks, which kind of like jigsaw pieces. They're just kind of coming in, and some of them maybe from the wrong puzzle, so we just get those out of the way. But some of them are from the puzzle I'm trying to make, and from there I'm like, okay, I've got these little elements, little things I want to include, and how can I then kind of flesh a story around this? Like, and I looked into the characters being like, this character, I want them to achieve this goal at the end of it, or I want them to progress in this way at the end of this batch of episodes. How do they get there? Are there any other characters who are involved in this story and their growth? And yeah, kind of went from there. And it was just kind of fine tuning and tweaking the story until it kind of became something which I was kind of happy with, and something which I felt was reasonably cohesive and didn't have any continuity errors, because that was the main thing I was worried about, like being like, okay, well, they mentioned this in this episode, but they're talking about something different in this episode. How to kind of make these two things relate? And yeah, it was just all these little bits of fine tuning. I'm sure I've missed some stuff, and there'll be eagle-eyed people being like, "Oh, wait, no, that's wrong." Fine, okay, yeah, you got me. But yeah, writing that whole story probably took about 6 to 7 months to finalize. And again, like it was being worked on. Thank you. Yeah, it was being worked on at the same time as the art style for the show and the character drawings and background design and things like that. And even then, like after I posted the first character lineup thing, the first one I ever posted had an older character model of Double D. So in some posts out there on the web, like it still has that older character model of Double D, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, why the fuck did I post that one? I posted the wrong one, and that was the one that gained the most traction. Like I've fixed it now on the official page and the Twitter and YouTube and whatever. But yeah, it's just all these little things which still get changed even after like promo material had gone out. Like the background design, like I initially went for this kind of sketched storybook look to it. So everything was kind of like as if it had been hand drawn and hand sketched out. And I could have done it with smooth lines, but I wanted to get this kind of rough around the edges feel. And I posted like, you know, some concept art of those backgrounds to the official Peach Creek page and things like that. And then I woke up one morning and just went, that looks like shit. So I ended up changing every single background. And I had drawn all the backgrounds already for episode 1 and the first minisode. And for episode 1 at the moment, there's probably about 90 to 100 backgrounds alone. So I had to redraw all of those to get this new art style where it's this kind of pseudo 3D sketchbook look still. Yeah. So like there's a lot of shading going on and all that, but you still have all that line art and things like that. But yeah, it's just I can't even remember what the bloody question was now at the beginning.
No, it was
run away.
No, it's perfectly fine. It was just like what was all going into this, how long it took you to write this.
Oh, right. That was it. Sorry. Yeah. I'm
it's perfectly fine, man. When you're doing all of this, and let me tell you something, when I've talked to some of the guys I've talked to, they're telling me they just do the voices, right? So the voices, they would shoot 2 years, you know, back in the day, a year and a half, year at like the earliest. And then the animators would go and animate all of this shit. Yeah. So I'm assuming you've been doing this for years at this point. Now you come to tell me you've only been doing this shit for a year. That is insane, man. What does a normal day, do you sleep? I mean, I know I don't sleep. I get 4 or 5 hours of sleep, you know, not bragging. It sucks, right? I just can't fall asleep or stay asleep. What does a normal day, like when you wake up, you know, you're always not going to talk to some nice American guy, right? So what do you do on a day-to-day basis? Man, we might have lost George. George, you still there?
Fingers crossed.
Nah, man, it's not going to die. We got some good internet back now, boys and girls. But what we talked about, it took, you know, you said 4 to 6 months to write the story, the script.
Yeah, 4 to 6 months or so. So it's it was kind of fleshing it out, and then I've kind of broke it down into the chunks. Like I knew that each episode would have to be roughly 10 to 15 minutes long, and I'd be like, okay, where would be a good place to end this part of the episode, and then what the next one would begin, and kind of we do this linear progression. So like the first 3 episodes, for instance, all take place like within 2 to 3 days, so they're all kind of one after the other, and then there's a bit of a gap, and then episode 4, episode 5, and etc. And I don't really want to go too much into
you're perfectly fine.
Spoiler territory, but like there's a lot of common themes which are explored throughout the entire show and in key episodes as well. Like the key one which I really wanted to highlight and look into was the theme of abuse, because that was something which like was the main driving factor of the finale of the original show, like Eddie's brother physically abusing the poor kid, and having done that for years and shaping Eddie into who he is.
Yeah.
And I like this idea of abuse cycles. Like you try and break this thing, but because of what's happened to you and the trauma you've gone through, or the trauma Eddie's gone through, it's difficult for him to break this cycle and be a better person, because
that's all he knows.
All he's ever known.
Yeah. That is something that is just so not talked about, right? And it's all about who you vote for, or who you pray to, or you know what you believe in, what side you're on, right? So that's issues like this that there's not very many cartoons that would introduce something back in the day, especially now, that has like some real connotation to it, some real meaning to it, some real heart, or some shit that nobody talks about because everybody's afraid to talk about.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm glad there's people out there like you that want to take this story and spin it into a different light where you can actually flesh out these things. And it's not just you talking down to a kid, or you looking at a kid any differently than what they were first, right? So it's you're talking to somebody like a person. You're getting some dark things, dark ideas, or dark shit that actually happens out there, man. What was the thought process going into that one? I mean, you obviously said it was his older brother, but what was it that stuck out about that you really want to make sure you brought back in and highlighted and talked about?
Yeah, again, great question. I think it was just so much I kind of noticed in the original show, like this kind of varying levels of abuse that kids suffered, like be it physical or mental or whatever. Like there were obviously like a lot of kind of toxic-ish relationships which characters had both on screen and with off-screen characters as well, that while hinted at in the original show, it's something which could really be explored for an adult audience, because almost everyone who grew up watching the show now is at least above the age of probably 20, 21 or whatever. And a lot of people would be mid-20s, early 30s like yourself. And the last show which dealt with similar themes like that, of which is an adult cartoon, would probably be Bojack Horseman.
Fantastic.
Which I fucking loved that show. It was just like, obviously, like it was quite a dark kind of show, but it was hilarious at the same time. It was so funny, and I wanted to have a show similar to that where we look into these slightly darker themes, but also keep the humor. Like Ed, Edd n Eddy was a show where it had a zany amount of slapstick and wordplay and puns and some really clever writing, clever humor. Now, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that myself, but I'll fucking try my best. And I wanted to get those two things together. Like other examples were like, Ed's parents, praising his little sister Sarah and like making her like this spoiled princess, and then Ed is living in a fucking basement, and Sarah gets a huge room all to herself, and then his parents physically took the stairs away when he was grounded. And,
that's some dark shit.
That's fucked. Yeah, that's horrible. So like obviously made a great gag in the original show, but you look at it and you're like,
could you imagine that happening? Like, I just come over to your house back there and I just take your stairs, so you can only live in half of your house. That is some, it's some shit. Like you think about this shit so deeply, and I fucking love. That's what I like. That's what I was talking about earlier with the comments, man. If you read the comments, hopefully they're all good and you don't see any negative ones that put you in a bad headspace. But seeing somebody's perspective, right? I look at one thing one way and you look at a thing one way, and then you make it sound so much more eloquent. I was like, he got his stairs taken. You're like, no,
thank you.
Up here, he was down here. He was the fucking troll of the family, not in the sense of the internet troll, but he was the guy that had hid under the bridge. And like looking at that now, I was like, I never thought. You're a smart motherfucker is what I'm getting at, George. This is fantastic.
Thanks, mate. No.
What was some of your favorite characters to like really like? Obviously, you said you connected more with Ed back in the day, or Double D, excuse me, and now you feel more like Ed or Eddie. A combination of those two. Taking your favorite characters out, right? What were some of the fun characters, right? And what were some of the characters you probably didn't like, but you're just sitting here scratching your head, like, man, what would they really say? Or was everything just like putting on shoes? It was easy as hell.
Oh, I wish it was easy. No. Like it's easy to like, you can write the characters, but my girlfriend, like I showed her a couple of the scripts and she was like, George, this just sounds like you. Like for all the characters, like Rolf would be speaking and she's just like, yeah, George, this is just your voice again. So I had to go back and rewrite stuff over and over. So certain characters like Rolf and Ed are actually quite hard to write for, because you have to like, obviously make them sound like teenagers, but they're still quite quirky and random and different characters, and the way they speak totally different to how someone like Double D would speak, where he's very much like articulate and wants to pronounce every single syllable and every single word and use as many big words as possible in a sentence, because he's smart and thinks it makes him sound better or whatever. Whereas Ed is just like early season Kevin from The Office. Yeah, so they were probably a bit hard to write for. Double D is quite fun to write because like it's just always fun to like write out a huge tangent because he'll just go on forever about something really stupid and rant about a really petty thing, and then you can just have Eddie being like, yeah, shut the fuck up at the end of it. And it's always a great little bit of dialogue to have between those two. But yeah, it can be a challenge to write some characters more than others, for sure.
It's funny you sit there and say that because, like, looking at a cartoon, obviously most cartoons are excuse me, most cartoons are directed towards kids. So to see something that's cartoons and you know where these kids come from, and then you're starting to hear them say, "You piece of shit," or "Man, shut the fuck up, Double D. You never shut up, man. Just shut the fuck." He's just grabbing him, just shaking him. Shut up, shut up, shut up. We're gonna do this, And the same thing could go back and forth with Eddie as well. So it's crazy seeing a progression. We might not see the colors of their clothes change, or they might wear the same t-shirt, right? So it's that same style. But it's nice to see the character and the way they think, or the way they present themselves, or the way they act or interact with other characters. It's nice seeing a growth, right? Like, man, he probably would say this because he looks like that type of guy that's just smashing Monster Energy drinks on a daily basis, right? He's that guy, right? So it's nice
exactly.
that you guys are taking an updated, evolved form version of this.
100%. Yeah.
You talked about your favorite characters and who you resembled the most, and then who you really had the trouble with, right? Who was the character that you just slipped right into? Not so much the Ed Boys, but who was one of those side characters or those supporting characters that you really just latched onto?
Ooh. Possibly Johnny.
Yeah.
Yeah. He does take a bit of a back seat in the first few episodes, and there's a very good reason why he does that, and it becomes apparent in the story. And he becomes very prominent in the later half of the show. And the guy who voices him, a brilliant guy by the name of Connor Cheeley, he has done a fucking stellar job at doing Johnny's voice. And I just like this idea of having, Johnny having these kind of social phobias and social anxieties as a kid, and his best friend was a piece of wood. He's now grown out of that. Like, Plank to him still means a huge amount, but it's something where he really wants to try and distance himself from that, and to try and be his own person. And it was fun to kind of it felt reasonably easy to kind of slip into that mindset of wanting to distance yourself from something and do something by yourself and be, I guess, well regarded for that. And yeah, I know you mentioned not to mention the Ed Boys, but Eddie is also a great one to relate to and write as well. Because while I myself am probably not as much of a hustler as Eddie is, and I certainly don't want to try to be. Like, Eddie has, a lot of interesting quirks and nuances, some of which I feel as if I have myself. So being able to slip into that side of myself while writing for him, it almost feels therapeutic in a way. And yeah, it's just interesting to write for him as a result of that, I think.
I mean, like I said, I've had, for what you have released and what we have talked about, I'm so pumped to see this. I've kept you a little bit longer than I usually like keeping people, but I was having
that's all right, no problem.
I was having a lot of fun getting to just see your side of the work, or how your brain thinks, man. Obviously, we couldn't do it all of this in the time we really allotted for it. So I'd love to have you back on down the road, and we can talk more in depth once you got a lot of more stuff done. Because like I said, a fucking year to do all of this when it would have took somebody and a whole animation studio 2 years to animate and all of this shit to put it out there. And it's you and a few people, man. It's fantastic between the voice acting and you're doing the artwork, the animation, you're writing, you're directing, you're producing all of the shit. You know, so there's only a few people. Take notice of that right now. In this point in time, man, you were at a point in your life where you were, I don't want to say just starting out because I don't want to diminish anything you've done before, but you were at a point where you're starting out, right?
Yeah.
I can't wait to see George Abingdon 30 years down the road, 40 years down the road. Hopefully I'm around long enough to see that, man. It is so fascinating to get to talk to somebody like yourself that you're fucking 23, man. You've got so much room to grow and you got so much time, right, to do the greatest shit you could possibly do, man. And you're starting here. Like I said, I just cannot wait to see what's going to come down the road with this show, but also with your career, man. This has been fun talk. Like I said, I met you just by messaging you through Facebook. So with that being said, man, where can people find you and find out what you're doing and really find and experience Peach Creek the way they really should be?
Yeah. Firstly, thank you so much for all that, the kind words. That means a lot. So thank you. Yeah. Again, I have to give a huge shout out to all the voice artists, and I have been working with a couple of animators. None of their work's been published yet, but huge shout out to them too. Like, incredibly talented people, and super honored and stoked to have them on board. I think to find me or to find Peach Creek, Twitter and Instagram are probably the best things. They both have the exact same handle. So on Twitter and Instagram, you can find me personally at George Abingdon. And Peach Creek is at Peach Creek Show. I couldn't get at Peach Creek, unfortunately. I think someone else beat me to the punch, but I got it on YouTube. So
yeah, you're winning. You're winning, right? So whenever I release this, I'll make sure I send you a copy just in case you could look it over and change anything or tell us what you do or don't want. Right? I always like giving that option to people. I try to edit as least amount I can because it's not me; it's my buddy Larry. This dude's a godsend, man. He's like one of my oldest friends, one of my best friends. And like this dude is awesome. Like, I just send him shit. He chops it up, some new stuff in there. Not so much the interview. It's just like he's chopping photos and doing all this crazy stuff because I am completely illiterate when it comes to technology, right? I can barely do this. And I just hook up a microphone and I talk to people like yourself, man. It has been fun. I can't wait, like I said, to see more. Any chance I get, man, I'm gonna plug the shit out of this show. I'm also, whenever this video comes out, I'm working like 2 weeks behind from when I shoot. But sometimes I try to coordinate with other people. Like if you're posting, a new video, a book or something like that, it'll direct traffic that I have towards you. So, I'm going to release in about 2 weeks. And like I said, I'll send it over to you.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you.
Like I said, this has been fun, man. You guys could have been doing anything in the world other than doing what you're doing now, but you chose to spend a little bit of time with me. Anything else you really want to say, George? I mean, I got the name right at the end of the episode, so I guess it's
did. Nice. Yeah, a bit of progression. No, Julian, it's been a fucking honor. It's been great. Thank you so much for having me on. Like, it feels so weird, like me, being a small time dude, like. I made an animation because it's a show I love and it's done out of passion, not profit. And to firstly get such an overwhelming reception, but then to be invited by you as well to this podcast is insane. Like the guests you've had on, and then you got little old me. Really appreciate it. So thanks a lot, mate.
I'm so far when it comes to podcasts and down the totem pole. I hope one day, I loved what you just said, man. Passion, not profit, because that's really why I'm doing this shit. I'm having so much fun just talking to people from all walks, from voice actors, animators like yourself, to I've had musicians on. I've had just one of my best friend, or one of my oldest friends at this point, man. He's just a bodybuilder now, so it's I like talking to people that have interesting shit to say, or things that I've seen that have elicited some kind of emotion that you felt way back in the day when you saw the Ed Boys for the first time, man. Like I said, I can't thank you enough for coming on here. I can't wait to do it again. We can go a little bit longer in format and talk more. Because by that point in time, with the way you're producing and working and writing and all this other shit, you're going to have an entire 14 seasons out by the time the next year rolls around, right? So, I can't wait to do it again. Yeah, man, that's been it, man. I've been Julian. He's been Greg. This has been What's in Your Head podcast. Good night, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.